Fragments of an ancient teaching. On one occasion, when walking in the park accompanied by Gurdjieff, a discussion arose as to whether or not there was any merit to the known theories on astrology. As the group continued to walk and discuss what there was in a person that could depend upon planetary influences, and what could not, they lagged behind Gurdjieff as he rounded a corner by a tree. In going around the tree, George dropped his stick, an ebony cane with a Caucasian silver handle that he was carrying, and one of the group bent down, picked it up, then returned it to him. Gurdjieff pointed out what had just taken place, saying this represented a simple demonstration of astrology. They all saw him drop the stick, yet only one picked it up and returned it. Each was asked to explain their actions and in doing so, to speak only for themselves. One said he had not seen the stick drop, as he was looking in another direction. The second said he had noticed that George had not dropped the stick accidentally, as happens when a stick gets caught in something, but that he had intentionally loosened his hand and let the cane fall. This had aroused the curiosity of the observer, and he had waited to see what would happen next. The third said that he saw George drop the stick, but was absorbed in thinking about astrology, particularly with regard to something that had previously been said, so did not pay sufficient attention to the stick, and what was taking place before him. The fourth saw the stick fall and thought to pick it up, but at that very moment the fifth person of the group bent to pick it up, and then returned the cane to Gurdjieff. This is astrology, as in the same situation one man sees and does one thing, another thing, a third thing, and so on. Each acts according to their type, which can be seen if we observe people and ourselves in this way. Then afterward we can perhaps think of a different kind of astrology and planetary influence. On other occasions, aside from rhythmic exercises done to music, dervish dances, many kinds of mental exercise, the study of different ways of breathing and so on, particular attention was given to exercises in the study of various imitations of psychic phenomena, thought reading, clairvoyance, mediumistic displays and so on. Before these exercises began, it was explained that the study of these tricks, as they were referred to, is an obligatory subject in Eastern schools, because without having studied all possible counterfeits and imitations, it is not possible to begin the study of phenomena of a supernatural nature. Someone is in a position to distinguish the real from the sham in this sphere, only when they know all the tricks, and are able to reproduce them. Aside from this, the practical study of psychic phenomena is in itself an exercise that can be replaced by nothing else, being the best way to develop certain skills, such as keenness of observation, shrewdness, and more particularly, for the enlargement of other faculties for which there are no terms in ordinary psychological language, but which must be developed. The important thing to remember in any work is that one comes to learn, and to take no other role upon themselves. At the same time, this does not mean that someone has no choice, or that they are obliged to follow something that does not respond to what they are seeking. There are no general schools, and each guru or teacher of a school works at his or her own specialty. One is a sculptor, another is a musician, a third a dancer, another a poet, and all the pupils of such a guru have to study that particular specialty. It stands to reason that here a choice is possible, and a person has to wait until they meet a guru whose specialty they are able to study, a specialty that suits their tastes, their tendencies, their type and their abilities. There is no doubt that there are many interesting ways, some like music and some may like sculpture, however it cannot be said that everyone should be required to learn music or sculpture. In any school work, there are undoubtedly obligatory subjects, and then there are, if it is possible to put it in this way, non-core subjects, the study of which are proposed merely as a means of studying the obligatory. The methods of schools may also differ greatly, and according to the three ways, the methods of each guru may approximate, either the way of the fakir, the way of the yogi, or the way of the monk. It is also of course possible that someone who is beginning work, can make a mistake, and seek to follow a leader such as they cannot follow for any distance. It stands to reason that it is the task of any leader, to see to it that people do not begin work with them who may find their methods, or their special subjects alien, incomprehensible and unattainable. If this does happen however, and if a person has begun to work with a leader whom they cannot follow, then of course having noticed and realized this, they ought to go back and seek another leader, or work independently if they are able to do so. Ouspensky, for example, did not possess a negative attitude towards the way of the monk, to religious or mystical ways in general. At the same time however he did not feel for one moment that such a way was possible for him, or suitable. He felt after time that Gurdjieff's group was heading towards the way of religion, of the monastery, requiring the observance of all religious forms and ceremonies. Ouspensky did not consider the religious way wrong in any manner, but it was not his way, and therefore a split developed with Gurdjieff. He continued to work independently abroad, and examine in particular the Enneagram, the explanation of which had not been completed by George. Continuation was sought with the wrong situation of the shock that comes into the Enneagram at the interval so, la. If the Enneagram is examined, in the context of the three octaves and their influence upon one another, then an illustration emerges representing, to a degree, the food diagram. The point 3, or the interval mi, fa, is the place where the shock comes in, that gives do 192 of the second octave. When the beginning of this octave is added to the Enneagram, it can be seen that the point 6 then comes at the interval mi, fa, of this second octave, and the shock, in the form of the third octave, do 48 that begins at this point. The completed drawing of the three octaves then emerges as illustrated. This shows that there is no wrong place for a shock. Point 6 shows the entry of the shock of the second octave, and the place at which the do of the third octave begins. All three octaves reach hydrogen 12 at point 8. In the first it is T, in the second it is So, and in the third octave it is Mi. The second octave, which ends at hydrogen 12 in the Enneagram, ought to go on further, however T12 and Mi12 require an additional shock. Points 1, 2, 4, 5, 7 and 8 represent, according to the food diagram, different systems within the organism. 1. The digestive system. 2. The respiratory system. 4. The circulatory system. 5. The brain and neural network. 7. The nervous system. And 8. The lymphatic and reproductive system. According to this diagram, the lines 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7 and 1, representing the content of fraction 7, show the direction of flow, or distribution of arterial blood in an organism, and then its return in the form of venous blood. It is particularly interesting that the point of return is not the heart, but the digestive system, which is indeed the case, as venous blood is first mixed with the products of digestion. It then goes to the right auricle through the right ventricle, then to the lungs to absorb oxygen, and from there, goes on to the left auricle and left ventricle through the aorta and on into the arterial system. Examining the Enneagram further, it can be noted that its 7 points represent the 7 points of the ancient world. In other words, the Enneagram could be an ancient astronomical symbol. If we take the order of the planets, in the order of the days of the week, then the diagram above emerges. Finally, right exercise, which leads directly to the aim of mastering the organism, subjecting its conscious and unconscious functions to our will, begin with breathing exercises. Without mastering breathing, nothing else can be mastered. At the same time, to master breathing is not so easy. There are 3 kinds of breathing. 1 is normal breathing. The second is inflation. The third is breathing assisted by movement. This means that normal breathing goes on unconsciously, it is managed and controlled by the movement center. Inflation is artificial breathing, where if, for example, a person says to themselves that they will count 10 inhalations, and then 10 exhaling breaths, or that they will inhale through the right nostril, and exhale through the left nostril. In this case, breathing is done by our formatory apparatus. The breathing itself is different, because the moving center and the formatory apparatus act through different groups of muscles. The group of muscles through which the moving center acts is neither accessible nor subordinate to our formatory apparatus. However, in the event of a temporary stoppage of the movement center, the formatory apparatus has been given a group of muscles that it can influence, and with whose help, it can set our breathing mechanism in motion. However, its work will of course be inferior to that of the moving center, and it cannot go on for a long period of time. If you have read literature on yogi breathing, then you may have heard or read about special breathing, connected with mental prayer in Orthodox monasteries. Breathing proceeding from the formatory apparatus is not breathing, but inflation, with the idea being that if someone carries out this kind of respiration long enough, and often enough, using their formatory apparatus, then the moving center, which remains idle during this period, can get tired of doing nothing, and begin working in imitation of the formatory apparatus. This can indeed sometimes happen. However, for this to take place, many conditions are necessary, such as fasting, prayer and sleep deprivation, all manner of difficulties and austerities that burden the physical body. If the body is well treated, then this cannot happen. In Orthodox monasteries, many exercises are practiced in order to enable the monks to carry out prostrations, according to various rules. This has one aim, which is to bring breathing into the right muscles, to take it over from the moving center. There is, however, a big risk in doing this, that the moving center may lose its habit of working correctly, and since the formatory apparatus cannot work all of the time, as for example during sleep, and the moving center may not want to perform its routine function, then the mechanism can find itself in a very serious situation. This kind of disorganization of function in our mechanism is almost inevitable when people try to do breathing exercises from books by themselves, without proper instruction. Then there is the third way mentioned, breathing through movement. This way needs great knowledge of the human mechanism, and is employed in schools directed by very learned people. By comparison, all other methods are amateurish and unreliable. The fundamental concept of this method is based upon the fact that certain movements and postures can call forth any kind of breathing you like, and it is also normal breathing and not inflation. The difficulty, however, lies in knowing exactly what movements, and what postures, will call forth certain kinds of breathing, in what type of people. The latter is particularly important, because people from this point of view are divided into a certain number of different types, and each type has its own definite movements, to achieve one and the same breathing, because the same movement produces different breathing with different types. Someone who knows the movement that can produce in them one or another kind of normal breathing is able to control their organism, and at any moment to set in motion one or another center, to cause that part that is presently working to stop. The knowledge and mastery of these movements, together with the ability to control them, like everything else, has its degrees. A person can know more or know less, and so make better or worse use of it. Each center is divided into 3 parts, in conformity with the primary division of centers, into thinking, emotional and moving. On the same principle, each of these parts is in its turn divided into 3. In addition, from the very outset, each center is divided into 2 parts, the positive and the negative. Then in all parts there are groups of roles connected together, some in one direction, and others in another direction. This explains the differences between people, and what is called individuality, as opposed to planetary or astrological influence. Of course there is in this no individuality at all, but simply a difference between roles and associations.